Hey all, so today we're going to be looking at C3.1, which is broken into two parts. This first part is looking at the brain and the sensory function related to hormones. So what are the roles of hormones in the integration of body systems? We want to be thinking about interaction and interdependence. So how are these things connected to each other? And we're going to be looking at pages 451 to 462. So firstly, we're going to be talking about melatonin. A number of you have probably heard of melatonin before. It's related to sleeping. So humans are adapted to live in a 24-hour cycle because that's how long days are. This is called your circadian rhythm. And this depends on two groups of cells in the hypothalamus, the suprachiasmatic nuclei. And they control the release of melatonin from a gland called the pineal gland. Melatonin increases in the evening and drops in the morning, and that's quickly removed from the blood by the liver. So you can see in this graph here, melatonin peaks around 2 in the morning, and then around 7 in the morning, that is going to drop off. And this can shift a little bit depending on if you're a morning person or an evening person. Melatonin helps us to go to sleep. And so part of the way that it does that is it's going to trigger a body temperature drop. The melatonin receptors in the kidneys suggest that the kidneys also limit urine production at that time, so you're not as likely to pee yourself. And then there's special cells in the retina, which are in the eye, that send signals to the suprachiasmatic nuclei. That's what this SCN stands for, to control that melatonin production. And so this is why it's recommended that if you have jet lag, you immediately get out in sunshine and experience the day, because that's going to help those retinal cells signal properly to the suprachiasmatic nuclei. Another hormone that's involved in maintaining things in our body is epinephrine. You might have heard of this as adrenaline, and it's produced by the adrenal glands, which are like little kidney hats on top of the cells. This is going to produce adrenaline to prepare for vigorous physical activity in a fight or flight response. And so this is known as the fight or flight hormone. So if you've ever exercised really, really, really hard and you've experienced like kind of shakiness afterwards, and or you've been very fearful of something and then you feel shaky afterwards, that's what's going on. This epinephrine has influenced your body, and that's why you feel that way. So what's happening with epinephrine or adrenaline is it's going to bind to adrenergic receptors in the membrane of the target cells, and that the target cells are going to be muscles, and that's going to increase the supply of oxygen to skeletal muscles, and it's going to maximize ATP production. Muscles are going to break down glucose to ATP, and liver is going to break down glycogen to glucose. And then also lung cells. So bronchi dilate so that the airways become wider, breathing speed increases, and heart rate, which is also muscle, is going to increase. And then lastly, arterioles are going to dilate to increase blood flow to liver and muscles, but contract to digestion and extremities. Extremities means like your arms and your legs. And so with all of this, that means that this hormone is signaling predominantly to your heart, your lungs, and your liver to release glycogen. So the job of the hypothalamus is a part of the brain, and it has neurosecretory cells, which make hormones that are released by the pituitary gland. So there's the posterior pituitary gland, and then there's the anterior pituitary gland. And the posterior pituitary gland secretes ADH, which stands for antidiuretic hormone. It's a hormone that is related to our kidney function and reabsorption of water. It also releases oxytocin, and oxytocin is related to, it's called the love hormone. It's related to production of breast milk, and then also the birthing process. And these hormones are released from neurosecretory cells into the blood and out through the posterior pituitary. So there's these suprachiasmatic nuclei and they have these neurosecretory cells. So these are cells that are going to make these hormones. And when a signal arrives, then they are going to release these hormones from the cells, and they're going to squirt it directly into the bloodstream and then out through the posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary also secretes hormones, but it does it in a slightly different way. And so it's going to secrete reproductive hormones like FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, or LH, luteinizing hormone. So follicle stimulating helps the eggs to develop from the ovaries, and luteinizing hormone is related to testosterone production in men, and then also ovulation in women. It also produces prolactin, which is a hormone related to breast milk production. And similar to the posterior pituitary, the anterior pituitary is still getting a signal from the hypothalamus through these neurosecretory cells, but they're not releasing the hormones directly from the neurosecretory cells. So they're receiving a signal, the neurosecretory cells, this GnRH, which is a neurohormone. RH means releasing hormone. So that releasing hormone is going to trigger the release of a different hormone. So the releasing hormone gets sent in the bloodstream, and then it signals to an endocrine cell in the anterior pituitary, and the anterior pituitary will release that specific hormone into the bloodstream. And so this is a two-step process instead of the posterior pituitary being a one-step process. And hormones are also going to control our heart rate, as we saw with epinephrine. The sinoatrial node is a special group of cells in the right atrium of our heart, and that controls our heart rate. And it's receiving messages from the medulla oblongata, which is a part of the brain, via the sympathetic nerve and then the vagus nerve. So the sympathetic nerve is going to signal to speed up the heart rate, and then the vagus nerve is going to signal to slow down the heart rate. The heart rate, so for the sinoatrial node, this is actually affected by epinephrine. And if the amygdala, which is a part of the brain that detects like a fear response, it sends a signal to the adrenal glands. Then the adrenal glands release epinephrine, and the epinephrine signals to the sinoatrial node to speed up heart contractions. So there's other factors, though, at play that are detecting homeostatic conditions in the body to control the heart rate. And so some of these things are pressure sensors and chemosensors in the aorta and the carotid artery. So when there is low pressure situations, that's going to increase the heart rate. And if there's low oxygen or low pH, so when I say low pressure, I'm meaning like low blood pressure. So if there's low blood pressure, then the heart rate's going to increase its speed so that you can circulate enough blood throughout your body. If there's low oxygen or high carbon dioxide amounts, that's going to result in low pH acidic conditions. Then your heart rate's also going to increase, because you're not getting enough oxygen to your cells and you're not getting rid of enough carbon dioxide. So in your aorta, which is the top of the heart rate here, and then also in your carotid arteries, which are on the side of your neck here that take blood to your brain, they have chemoreceptors and pressure sensors in there to detect what's going on with your heart. So yeah, that's how your body's going to regulate your heart rate. How is your body going to regulate breathing? Well, an increase in blood pH will make the situation more acidic. So actually, this should say a decrease in blood pH. I apologize. Which means the blood is going to be more acidic. So that's going to increase your breathing. What this acidity is happening, it's actually the same process that's occurring for ocean acidification. As we increase carbon dioxide in our blood, it makes carbonic acid, and that carbonic acid is going to make blood slightly more acidic. And that's telling your body with those chemoreceptors, there's too much carbon dioxide in our blood, and so we need to get rid of it and pick up oxygen instead. And as that's a negative feedback loop, meaning you're going to breathe and breathe and breathe until you replace the oxygen and get rid of the carbon dioxide, and then you're going to stop breathing so quickly. So you can think about going for a quick run and then you're breathing hard, but once you have replaced your oxygen, then you're going to stop breathing hard. And your blood pH is going to hover around 7.35 to 7.45. Remembering that blood pH or pH is a logarithmic scale. So even a small change like this is still quite a large concentration change. So nerve signals are triggering the diaphragm, which is a muscle underneath your lungs here, and your intercostal muscles, which are between your ribs, to contract to breathe faster or slower. And that's going to be monitored by stretch receptors in those muscles. Again, chemoreceptors are in the aorta and the carotid arteries. Remembering the carotid are on the side of the neck. And if oxygen is too low for the brain, the carotid arteries are going to detect that and signal to the breathing centers in the brainstem to increase the ventilation rate. These signals are going to override those from chemosensors monitoring at other locations, because obviously if your brain runs out of oxygen, then you die, and that's got to override everything else. So to summarize, melatonin is a hormone controlled by the pineal gland and regulates sleep. Adrenaline is a hormone released by the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys and controls heart rate and breathing. The hypothalamus is closely linked to the pituitary gland, and it signals to the gland to release a wide range of hormones. pH pressure and oxygen sensors in the aorta and carotid arteries control ventilation and heart rate via the medulla oblongata, which is the brain stem. So I'm just going to move my face here so you can see here. These are hormones released by the posterior pituitary and the anterior pituitary, and I've kind of summarized the ones that you might need to know here. All right, thank you for watching. That is the end of this video.